All right. I apologize for the confusion, but this is the first time I have tried to schedule a video. And, in life, there are many times where things happen where, uh, you know, we avoid them because they might be difficult. So I encountered a challenge. I didn't know how to do this. It's my first time, but I will learn. And that's why I'm here for you because I have a message for you. Now, it may be funny, but this is about motivation. Now, I'll give this a moment, but let me play around with some other stuff. Okay. So, one of the key concepts here is mindfulness. So, let me see if I can do this because I haven't learned how to share things share the screen yet. So, mindfulness is bringing awareness and attention to private events. Well, let me see here. Private events. This is live. So, you have to think on the fly and mistakes will happen, and that's perfectly part of the deal. Mindfulness, bringing in private events. Okay. And then we're not only just going to bring awareness and events to private events, we're going to do it moment by moment. And we're going to do it non judgmentally, in service of accomplishing our goals and living according to our values. Okay. So then, what is the goal? Okay. What is the goal? Oh, I kind of like this. So this is about motivation and procrastination. So take a moment, and think about something you're avoiding. Take a moment, think about something you're avoiding. You are avoiding because this is supposed to be helpful for you. We want you to live the life that you want to live. And over time, I've kind of learned that my job as a clinical psychologist, by the way, I'm grabbing some materials here to help you out. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a PhD. I've been in practice I've been licensed for 14 years. I've worked in many hospitals, worked with veterans. I've housed hundreds of veterans. I now employ dozens of employees in New York City and in Tokyo. Greetings from Tokyo. I'm in Tokyo. And I've got a Patreon thing here. This is the Bunny Therapy. That's the name of the YouTube channel. All things psychology. And guess what? I wanted a t-shirt. You know what I did? I made it. So you have some sort of goal that you have in mind too, and you can accomplish your goal. Think about what it is. Okay, here's one thing is nobody comments, during these chats, or comments on my videos. And if you can put something in the chat thingy over here and tell me what it is that you're avoiding. Now, here's a list of things that people are avoiding, right? Okay, people avoid going to the doctor. People avoid, because a lot of research is done on students, they avoid exams. But think about it. in whatever job you've got something to do and you might be putting it off. Cleaning the house. You know how many people avoid doing the dishes? Um, you know, uh, and the dishes, that's something that's important, especially if you live in a place that has bugs. Paying bills. I'm guilty of this. I just purchased a home in Hawaii. I hope that you were there to see me as I closed it. And and so I spent a lot of money trying to set all that up, and get it ready for Airbnb and stuff like that. And American Express said, "Hey, buddy, you better pay us some money. We noticed that you've got a lot of charges." And immediately, if we use that mindfulness model that you can see right there, I had something come up for me, a private event, but I avoided it in the moment. I avoided it in the moment because it was uncomfortable. Now, people like to say I felt bad. I didn't feel bad. I felt nervous. I felt uncomfortable. I felt worried. I thought, like, okay, how am I going to do this? And you know what? The truth of the matter is, I could just do it. I'm avoiding it, right? So people avoid making important decisions. They avoid starting a new project. I've got a new project that I started right here. I'll show it to you because the name of this video is the Cotton Candy Mountain, and I had an idea, and so I've decided I'm going to animate using AI a cotton candy mountain. And the reason why I call it a cotton candy mountain is because I was talking to a client the other day, and this client had put off updating their resume, online. And when you put something online, like I am right now, it's very exposing, right? Because everybody can see. You can see my couch and my Beastie Boys hoodie right over there, and you can see the little Muji pillow I got. It's incredibly soft. It's very nice. And anyways, so you can see my home, and it's a little exposing. So putting something up on a resume online, putting up, editing your resume online, putting it on LinkedIn or putting it out there, can be anxiety provoking, right? And I asked the client, well, how long has it been since you've updated that LinkedIn? And the client said, it's been like 2 years. And I'm like, 2 years? You have been avoiding for 2 years. Now, why do you want to update your resume? And the person says, well, I'm dissatisfied with my job. I'm like, okay, well, then what's going to happen if you avoid updating your resume? And the person said, well, nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, that's right. You're going to stay stuck. Now, if we put this to the thing that I put up there, right there in the comments, you can see it, So she's avoiding for 2 years updating her resume online, even though she's dissatisfied with her job. Because if she thinks about reaching out with these big, heavy fingers and touching this keyboard, she gets worried. She starts imagining this future that does not exist, by the way. She imagines this imaginary world where something bad happens in the future that hasn't happened yet. And by the way, that is what anxiety is. And remember, I'm a PhD clinical psychologist, and I did my dissertation on worry and what gets in the way of it. And anyway, so she's imagining that she's going to change her resume online, and then people will laugh at her, or people will say, well, look, this person doesn't do anything right, or like, oh, look at this person's history and stuff like that, and criticize them. And meanwhile, they're doing absolutely nothing. And what happens when you do nothing? Well, more time passes. I would like to say that nothing happens, but it's not true. If you put something off, the world keeps going and you still don't get that job. So, So if we plug this into the mindfulness formula, she has a goal. She has a goal to get satisfying work. Now, this person's no dummy, and this person is possesses a very desirable credential. I'm being very careful about how I say all this because I don't want to give this person away. But this person has a very desirable credential that people in this industry, which can generate a lot of influence and money, can possess. But the person's dissatisfied with it. So when the person thinks about updating their resume, that's their goal, is to get the new job, but they're putting it off. Why? They're avoiding it in the moment. Remember the little formula I've got right next to you says moment by moment, because in the moment that person has a private event, and a private event means everything that happens from this side of the skin inwards, right? A private event is like a feeling, a worry, a frustration, a hunger pain, um, whatever it is, something comes up for that person in that moment. And this is the mindfulness thing, they judge it to be something that should not be. So what do? They avoid it. And what happens? They don't update their resume, right? So what happens? They stay in a job that they don't want. Now, I hope that everybody looks at that last comment that I said. Take a moment. Think about something you are avoiding, something that you want from life, something that you want. And so the person says, "You're right. I'm going to go on LinkedIn and I'm going to change that. I'm going to update it." And I said, "Okay, when?" And the person's like, "I'll do it tomorrow." And I'm like, "Well, how long will that take?" And the person said, "Well, it'll take about 60 seconds if I really think about it." I'm like, "Do it now." And they're like, "Oh, what are you talking about? Do it now? Do it now? Well, that means I would have to pick up these fingers and put them on the keyboard." I'm like, "Yeah, I challenge you. Are you capable of picking up these heavy, heavy fingers and putting them on that keyboard and then like clicking on LinkedIn and changing and the person did it. The person did it in that moment. And 60 seconds later, what took 2 years was done. And now that person has a possibility that was not there before. And they can always go back and edit it and change it back to the way it was if they want to. But they were able to take action in the moment to tolerate that discomfort, update their LinkedIn, and then guess what happened? Did they feel worried? Did they feel depressed? Did they feel panicked? No. What they felt was relief and hope. And you can too. So think about it. What is it that you're avoiding? What else do people? Tackling difficult conversations. Okay, this one's a tough one. Like maybe you missed somebody's birthday, or maybe you don't like your sister and you've got to call them up and check in on them. Well, if you take that moment to do like a check inside, you will find that what's driving it isn't the sister. It's not the nasty grandma or whoever it is that you're supposed to speak with. You know what it is? It's your internal events. That's what's avoiding. And you avoid it so you don't pick up that heavy old phone, like this phone right here. You got this heavy old phone. Actually, it is kind of hard to open. And then you can like tap on it and stuff like that. And then you can call that person. And even though you feel uncomfortable in the moment, you will feel a sense of relief. What else? Maybe it's a breakup. Maybe it's asking for a raise. A lot of people get worried about this stuff. Ooh, here's a good one, especially in America. Going to the doctor. Maybe you've got like a little thing on there. And you're like, "Okay, manana, tomorrow I'll make an appointment. Let me go online, and then in the meantime, there's Instagram. And Instagram, you know what? I have never heard anybody say, hey man, I was worried about something and I decided I found Instagram suddenly in my hand. And like 2 hours later, I was scrolling through it and then of course the moment passes and they don't make the doctor's appointment. That's one of the nice things about being here in Japan is everybody pays into the system. It costs 30% every time you go, so your average bill is about $25, maybe $100 if you go to a fancy hospital and get some sort of procedure done, like a scan or a blood test and all that stuff. But there's tons of doctors. There's a bunch of dentists right there. You could just go in there because of the way the system's set up, and you could just go to the doctor. You don't need to go through all the rigmarole. So it's really nice. But in America, it's really difficult to get over that hump. And that means you're going to have to go online. You're going to have to get out your insurance card. You're going to have to pick up the phone. I saw that funny John Oliver thing. A long time ago, I sat next to John Oliver on an airplane, and it's funny. I don't want to rat him out and talk about what was happening there. Um, but since then, he's got his own show and he's got his own thing going on, and so there's all these extra bells and whistles I don't really care about. I just like the comedy. But he had a funny bit where he's like, you know what, how to scare a teenager? Give them a working phone and say, there's a phone call on here and it's for you. Ah. So you're going to have to pick up the phone and maybe make an appointment and go to that doctor, because one of the things that gets lost is that if you're proactive, you're gonna save yourself a ton of medical problems. You're gonna get your blood pressure medication. You're gonna find out, is this tumor, is this like little dot, like there's a little red dot there. I went to the dermatologist and I'm like, okay, what do I got here? And they're like, it's not benign. It's not cancer. It's just benign. If you want, we could take it off. And I'm like, well, it's just a little red dot. I mean, I don't care. But I found a sense of relief in picking up my feet and going there, going to the gym. Now, I live generally in places where I have to walk places, and because cars are just not needed. There's usually some sort of like train or something. And in Japan, it's particularly lovely. But even in New York, I don't mind. I'll get on the subway. And what was once terrifying of exposing myself to the general public in New York City, where there is a lot of psychopathology on the train. But I like walking everywhere, right? So getting to the gym. How do you get to the gym? You know what you do is you turn this thing right here off and you turn those feet on and you put your shoes on and then you start walking. Now, maybe you're going to walk to a car and then drive, but once you get there, it's so much easier, but you got to get there. You got to go, right? You got to get into action. An object in motion stays in motion. And once you get there, the gym, you might have thoughts like, I'm too tired or something like that. But if you get in there and you do the exercises, just 20 minutes is all it takes. And it can be really light. As a matter of fact, if you're avoiding the gym, keep it light. And when you come out of it, not only will you have a physiological reaction that's beneficial, but you will have a sense of efficacy, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment that will help motivate you to do it again. So again, this here PhD psychologist is telling you, Isaac Newton was right. An object in motion stays in motion. What else? Completing tedious administrative tasks. Anything that feels overwhelming or boring or requires sustained effort. And what's funny is because if the sustained effort is Instagram or something like that, or TikTok, you're off to the races. I wish we could figure out a way of making the gym that enjoyable. But yeah, so getting difficult conversations, going to the doctor, doing administrative tasks. I mean, it's a real like, okay, so I just started doing the Airbnb thing. And so, the people who sold me the place in Hawaii, which is really awesome, go to Bunny Therapy and look at Waikiki, and you can see the, you can see, oh, this is funny. You can see the apartment, right? You can see the place, and it has like a barbecue and it has a pool and a hot tub and a brand new sauna and a koi pond, and it's got a balcony and a beautiful view. And so it's a great place for an Airbnb. And you can watch me in the apartment that I'm, there's nothing of mine really in there. It's just like furnished for an Airbnb. And you can see the apartment, you can see the balcony, and then you can go out on a trip because the reason why I'm wearing glasses is I got some sort of weird virus in my eyes. And I don't have American health insurance anymore, but they have tons of Japanese stuff. So I walk down to the beach, which is like a block away, so you can see the place. It's really cool. And then you turn right and you walk along the beach, and you pass the statue of Duke, who's like this surfer from like 100 years ago, and he's a hero. He saved like a bunch of people from drowning in Orange County, California, like 100 years ago. And then you can walk to the doctor, and then there's like the Cheesecake Factory and stuff like that. It had a wonderful sandwich. But you can go see the Airbnb. Now, the previous owners said, oh, what we'll do is we'll just transfer over the existing reservations over to you. And I'm like, wow, that's great, And but it turns out that's not a real thing, and it's a hassle. And then so all these people are coming online and they're saying like, hey, what happened to the price? Now, I think that they have a good case. They want to go to the awesome Airbnb that you can go to too. And they want to enjoy the space, and it's a great space. I lived in it. It was wonderful. And there's a price differential between what they were originally booked for and what it is now, because it changes depending on demand and stuff like that. So then Dr. Fur here has to figure out, okay, my goal is to make people happy in an Airbnb so that this place can sustain itself. And so my goal is to make people happy, to be a good host, to have so that they get treated well, and they're like, but they're worried about the price difference, and it's like $200, that's a lot of money if you're on vacation. Now, my Airbnb has free parking, so you're going to save a ton of money by coming there. But I had to pick up the phone a little bit earlier. I had to use my Japanese phone, which I didn't want to do. And I got a hold of some nice person in the Philippines. And of course, just like everything, isn't this the truth? You go on YouTube and you look up like how to do something online. And every time you go, the software is different. And every time you try and mimic what the guy on the YouTube is doing, you're like, oh, it's this easy. And of course, it's never like that. And so I called the Airbnb, which I didn't want to do, Airbnb. And then they're like, do you see the reservation button? And I'm like, there's no reservation button. And so, of course, what they're saying, what I'm saying is different, and it's annoying and it's boring. But I figured it out, and I sent the message to my people, and I want to take care of them. I want them to be happy. And I'm glad that they brought up this difficult conversation like, hey, what you're offering is now $200 more. And it's my goal to make them happy and to so that people sing praises about this endeavor that I took, because it's a risk. Now, I'm going to get into the motivation and trying to get you unstuck from whatever thing that's going on in your life. Again, take a look here. Dr. Fur is inviting you, take a moment, think about something you're avoiding. And if you do that, you're probably going to avoid me and go watch something else and get on Instagram. But think about it. Are you avoiding making an important decision? Are you avoiding talking to your boss? Are you avoiding the doctor? Are you avoiding completing a task like calling up Airbnb and trying to figure out how to save that money? Um, Anything that's overwhelming. And, like when it comes to overwhelming things, I've got a video on this. I had a client because my other office is in Midtown Manhattan, across the street from the Empire State Building, and Macy's is down the corner, and it's like a pretty cool location. But wait a minute, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah, so like my clientele tends to be pretty high powered. There are fashion people that who they work for, and and banks and institutions and all, like, all that stuff. I got to be careful about what I say, because I don't want to give anybody away, and I don't want to disparage any institutions or brands or anything like that. But one of these jobs, I didn't know what this is. Do you know what this is? Consulting. Consulting means these people go to business school, which is basically networking school. And it's really funny. There's a lot of barriers to entry. Like when you start undergrad, you think, oh, I want to be a communications, I want to be on CNN or something like that. And then you get there and you have to start doing these boring classes. Well, after a while, after you start getting in there, then everything becomes exactly like you imagined, like it would be. Like, oh, I want to go in there and create a company and tell them what to do. And that's what a consultant does. They're charged with, like, okay, here's a startup. You've got $2 million. We want to get them to $8 million. Come up with a plan, come up with a timeline, hire a team, come up with the resources. And so now you're supposed to fly into action and make this all happen. And it's on the fly. You got to come up with all these things, and all the millions of dollars are on your plate, and you've got to come up with it. And your to-do list is amazing. Even just hiring is, like, for people to do it, it's like overwhelming. And then they freak out, and then they come to me, they come to Dr. Tyson, and they don't know what to do, and they're like terrified, and they're like, of course they got to put on a brave face in front of the client, because the client's paying millions of dollars. And they're like, I don't know what to do. I just want to curl up in a ball, and I just want to hide and go to bed. And I'm like, okay, well, have you made a to-do list? And they're like, well, yeah, of course. I've got a master's degree in business. Like, I've got a business degree. I know how to make a to-do list, for Pete's sake. And I'm like, okay, well, let me hear it. And then they just start rattling off all this stuff. And it's pretty apparent after a while that, yeah, this is pretty extensive, and what a daunting task this is. And so they don't know what to do, and they're stuck. So they're having a private event. Look at that mindfulness thing. Their goal is to execute a business plan. But private events pop up when they start thinking about doing it. And then they start having, like, things like worries, and they start imagining these fictitious things where the boss gets mad at them or the client gets mad at them. And they get so overwhelmed that they just sort of like want to curl up into a ball, because they judge these feelings to be like terrible things, when in fact, if you describe them, all of a sudden it's like shining light on things. And all of a sudden you realize that you're not having a bad day. What you are is, you've got a list so long that you're confused and unsure of where to start, and you're worried. And so my advice to someone like that is, what is the easiest thing? Because what happens is, people will look at that list and says, I got to do the list. I got to do this big list. Well, If you approach it that way, your chances of getting the list done in one sitting are very low. Why don't you try this? Because remember, Isaac Newton said an object in motion stays in motion. Force is mass, that's you, times acceleration, that means moving, like going to the gym, putting one foot in front of the other. And so, the first thing you got to do is like, what is the easiest thing on that list to do? And do it. And if you start doing the little easiest thing, all of a sudden there comes a new private event, which is, that is done. I feel relief and hope. And I could do this real quick too. And before you know it, their their list is like a useful Instagram. They get sucked into it and things get done. Same thing with people with like sexual appetite problems. They're like, I just don't feel like it. Like the idea of, sex can be like involving a lot of exposure and effort. But if you get into it, if you just start a little bit, then the rest seems to unfold naturally. It's one of the most natural things in the world. And I don't want to run afoul of YouTube, so I'm going to be really careful, even though I've marked this as not for children. So then why do people procrastinate? Why do they avoid? And this is where the cotton candy mountain comes in, because like that lady who wanted to update her LinkedIn profile for 2 years and didn't do it, but did it within 60 seconds with me. She created a barrier between herself and her goals. And I call it like, my job is to find out what you want and help find out what gets in the way of it. And almost always it's thoughts and feelings. Yes, there's cancer. Yes, there's war, but almost always the problem that's getting in the way of you getting what you want is just a thought and just a feeling. And most of the thoughts are futuristic things that don't even exist. And so imagine like a mountain in between you and whatever it is, like a mountain between you and that doctor's office, right? Or you and that pharmacy. And like, well, you're thinking, well, how in the heck am I going to get past this mountain to that pharmacy, that doctor, that whatever it is, the grocery store, to go shopping so that I control what I eat, right? Because you can just order food but the reason why restaurant food tastes so good because it's just loaded with salt and sugar and fat, which is okay. Your brain needs that, but not every day. You need to like it. It's probably a good idea to learn how to make your own food at least some of the time, right? So you got this mountain in front of you, and like, well, man, am I going to build a tunnel? Or like dig a tunnel and get through the mountain that way, or am I going to have to climb up the mountain to the top and like get all the way down? This sounds exhausting. Can I go around the mountain? And it turns out that the mountain isn't what you think it is. It's just something that you've built up in your head. Imagine if the mountain, whether it's the size of a desk or the size of your door, the size of your dwelling that you live in, or the size of an actual mountain, and it's made out of pink cotton candy. And the wonderful thing about cotton candy is that it's like big and fluffy, but if you touch it, it easily gives. And if you put your tongue on it, it dissolves and disappears. And that is the cotton candy mountain. It's an illusion. It's a mirage. It's there. Don't get me wrong. It's there. There's something there. But it's not what you think it is. It's not like stone and granite. It's cotton candy. And if you just make contact with it, then it will disappear. If you make contact with that cotton candy mountain, all of a sudden you realize this is not granite. This is kind of easy to get past. I can easily move this. This is very light. it looks big. And if you put your tongue on it, it's delicious exercise to embrace this thing. And so, like, here you are, here's your goal, and the mountain is in between you, and it's a myth. It's not a big stone thing that you got to tunnel through or go around or climb over. Just touch it, and you'll see it melts away and drifts away. Now, how does one actually get this message across? And oh, geez, Louise, I got this iPad here, iPad over there, got my notebook here, got my list, and I want to show you because I have a message for you. The same way I want to take care of my Airbnb guests, I want to create a video and I want people to watch it. And so I decided to see if I could look up um, uh, if I could look up how to make animated videos. I don't know if you can see that, but I did this. This is my first attempt at this is my first attempt at making an animated video from AI. And you can see there's the bunny there, and there's the cotton candy mountain. Somehow I haven't learned how quite yet how to get the cotton candy in front of the refrigerator to block it, because in this particular scenario, the bunny wants to eat and it's like deciding whether to order food or just to make it. And so I created this moments before this video. This is my first attempt because I had a cotton candy mountain of my own, which is, I don't know how to make a 3D Pixar style bunny with struggling to make food. And I've got 2 refrigerators in there, which is not what I wanted. And the cotton candy mountain is not exactly too big, and it's not exactly blocking the refrigerator. But I did it, right? I did it. And when I'm done, I'm gonna continue. I'm gonna continue to try and improve upon this until I can make a video and put it online for everybody to see what a cotton candy mountain is. Because with the visual it helps, and with a little story it might be engaging. And then I'll get people to watch, and then I'll get hours, and then it'll be good. So why do people procrastinate? What is it that gets in the way of them doing what they want? Well, the first is fear of failure. And, like, it's really interesting that people fear failure and they might fail. Okay. Little refresher there. They might fail, but they might not fail. But the fear of failure gets in the way. And I'll come back to this. But the fear of failure, and most of the time, if you sit down with them and they think about something they got to do, like make an appointment for the doctor, or have that conversation with their boss, or to go to the gym, or to, fill in the blank, have that difficult conversation, pick up the phone and ask for the money back from the bank, or to find a charge on their account that they don't understand. There's a fear of failure, and it's just the mere threat that they could fail that will get in the way of them getting what they're done. This was like 8 years ago when crypto was still kind of like looked at as a little funny. It's not like today where it's being bantied about for national policy, and Bitcoin, which people used to make fun of, is now kind of seen as one of the more respectable ones and the more reliable ones. Anyway, so I had a guy who worked for a financial institution, and he had invested in a bunch of like smaller cryptos because he wanted to hedge his bets, and he didn't want to buy a whole Bitcoin, which I think at the time was like $50,000. I think they're like 96,000 now, and or something like that. And he couldn't find his passwords to this money. So, and I'm like, well, how much money are we talking about? $3,000. Well, $3,000, that's nothing to sneeze at. That's some money. Why don't you go get it? He's like, well, it's crypto, so you can't like just, recover a password. I'm like, well, why don't you try? And he's like, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. So that's it. I guess I just lost the money. And I'm like, well, like the best way to do is kind of wait until like people have that tip of the tongue phenomena, like where they know a word but they just can't say it, or maybe they have a combination for something and they just don't remember what it is at the moment, or um, the name of a place or something like that. And all of a sudden, one day it just comes right back. I have a theory that one day there's going to be some sort of interface that'll take away some of this noise, and we'll just be able to think of what we want to think of when we can think about it. But um, one day he finally comes back to me and says, guess what? I remembered my crypto. And so he was able to put his password in there, and he was able to get his money out. And but for a long time he stayed stuck just because he was afraid of failing. And people do this all the time. They imagine these things happening and then they don't do it. Whether it's asking someone to dance or go on a date, or maybe asking for a raise, or you know, uh, I don't know, like picking up the phone and talking to the credit card company and being like, what's this dispute? Or can I get a lower interest rate? Or, whatever it is. And but the very idea of this imaginary future keeps people from going into action. So there's the fear of failure is one. Another one I covered already is that things are feeling overwhelming, like the tasks are too large, they're too complicated, and they seem like a big cotton candy mountain. Like, oh man, I gotta cross a mountain to get this done. I can't get around a mountain, I can't climb a mountain, I can't go through the mountain. I just, this is too much, you know. And so people delay doing things, right? And that's why I like the metaphor of the cotton candy mountain, because if you actually touch the task at hand, obviously there is no such thing as a cotton candy mountain, right? We know that. But cotton candy does exist, and most people have had the experience of looking at this big thing and then touching it, and they could squish it down, they can eat it, they can put their hands on it, and it melts away. So that's real, right? You can you can embrace and consume or make this big thing smaller, and it's delicious doing so. That's a kind of play on words. It's delicious to take these things on. So um at any rate, yeah, you can do what I suggested earlier to the person, which is, instead of looking at this big, complex web of things and lists to do and people to contact and anxiety provoking things, start out with something small and easy. And all of a sudden, like the time wearing away the stone. Um, things start to get small. There's a reason why there's sand on the beach, right? Because the waves keep coming in and pushing the rocks together, and eventually the rocks like make little tinier rocks, and before you know it, you have a big sandy beach in Cancun. And speaking of big fluffy cotton candy mountains, the sunsets in Cancun are absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it on Earth. You would figure that the Earth is the Earth and it'll just look the same anywhere. No, that might actually be the inspiration for the Cotton Candy Mountain, because it's big, fluffy pink clouds at night there in a way that I've never seen. I highly recommend it. Now, that's another thing that people put off: going on vacation. Going on vacation. And they start imagining all sorts of failures and worries and financial costs and all of these things. I remember I had the first time I went to Disney World in Florida. It was because Hilton Grand Vacations offered me a place at the Hilton, and I had to go sit through a really boring presentation for an hour and a half. But you know what? I stayed at a Hilton in Orlando for 4 days, and it cost me like $99. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of money. That was a lot of money. But I got to go to Disneyland, and I got a cool cowboy hat. I lost it, but it was pretty cool. You needed a hat there. It's very hot. Um, Okay, so then there's the fear of failure, and then there's feeling overwhelmed, and the lack of motivation. And you know what? This is something where I don't think it's really helpful to wish for something that doesn't exist. This is where Isaac Newton's object in motion stays in motion, and overcoming inertia really help. In other words, like going to the gym, that means putting on your shoes. Can you do that? You don't need to like go to the gym. What you need to do is put on your shoes and then lift up these heavy feet and put one in front of the other. And whether it's going to a car, now if you got a car, come on, like that's pretty easy. Where I live, you walk somewhere, and it's actually quite nice. I'd rather walk than drive. But so like, don't think about things in terms of motivation. Think about things in terms of just doing them. I remember like being in college, and I sat down. We were undergrads, and of course, undergrads think they know everything. And I got a news for you, college students. They're just like anybody else. Somebody's really brilliant, and some are just, you know, nothing beyond the ordinary. No matter how special they think they are, they're just a human being, just like you and me, and there's nothing remarkable about them. But some people do have everybody has, I do IQ tests, right? And so the IQ tests break down 14 different things that the brain does and measures it in reliable ways. And but there's many things that are not measured that on the IQ that the brain does, like write music or write poetry or use pigments and applying them to a surface and making a painting, or creating a script, or dancing, or playing an instrument. These are things that you can't necessarily measure on in an IQ test. And the idea then for motivation is to do something. So the writer, I don't know if he was a good writer or not, he said, "You know what the hardest thing about writing is?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Writing. Writing's the hardest thing about writing. You got to write." And I'm like, "You're right." Pun intended. Perfectionism. This one is insidious. Perfectionism. And, I had a guy in Brooklyn, New York, and he came from far out by the Verrazano Bridge, way out there in Bay Ridge. And, but he really liked the display windows at the holiday season at Macy's. Now, if you don't know about this, like you've seen the Macy's Day Parade, right, around Thanksgiving, and they have all the celebrities and all the floats, and people come from all over the world. And at the end, Santa Claus shows up. And like I said, my office was right down the street from all of this. So I saw it on a daily basis. And they have this huge, sparkly Believe, sign and stuff like that. And during the holidays, the people at Macy's, and it's their flagship store. Did you know that there's a wooden escalator in there? It's pretty cool. But they have these display windows with all the different scenes in them, and they're carefully crafted and they're beautiful. And whoever it is that got commissioned to make them that year is a lucky person. And they're a lot of fun to look at, especially if you got family or something like that. And but every time he wanted to do something, I'm like, hey, did you do this? Fill in the blank. Did you do that? And he goes, no. And I'm like, well, why? And he said, oh, because I got to get myself in the right frame of mind. I got to get myself. So he's waiting for things to be arranged in the fashion that he thinks they should be arranged, or else he's not going to take any effort. And that's a form of perfectionism. It's really a form of avoidance, which is what perfectionism is. And now people with perfectionism generally have kind of an obsessive character, like they have high standards about themselves and others, and so they don't want to do things unless things are just right. They don't want to write the book until they're just right. And I mentioned this before, that my undergrad mentor, he the forward to his book, because he at nighttime created one of the classic experiments on cognitive dissonance of all time. And so he peaked out kind of like on his first thing when he was young. And so then how do you live up to this? And so he decided to start just doing more experiments as a leap of faith. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I wish more people could get motivation, not by getting motivation, but by willing to take a risk and make a leap of faith. And in the forward to this book, he talks about The Plague by, I think it's Albert Camus. And there's this guy, Mr. Grand, with, Grand, which means big in French. And he's this big guy. And he's trying to rate the book. And he wants the book to be so perfect that when it's done, he wants the readers to all stand around and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the perfect sentence. Hats off, right? We got to pay respect. So it's like about a horse going down a flowery street with leaves and stuff. And he's like, is it a flowery street or a flower strewn street? And he's like trying to come up with the perfect sentence. And meanwhile, his friend, who's a physician, tells him he has the plague and he's going to die tomorrow. And he gets all upset and he's got his like manuscript and he just throws it into the fire, which is ironic because he's finally just doing something rather than spinning his wheels. And he's not getting anywhere by like trying to write this perfect book. And turns out the next day he's going to live. But he threw this thing away. And we hope, I haven't read the book, but I hope he learned from that you don't have to have everything perfect to get it done. I have a philosophy: just start something and then improve it, right? Like I don't have to create the perfect video. I don't have to create the perfect cartoon rabbit. Like, I made a mistake. This image has 2 refrigerators. There's supposed to be 1. The cotton candy is supposed to be bigger and it's supposed to be blocking the refrigerator. But you know what? I did it and I can improve upon it. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? And you're okay now. So I want you to start thinking about, I asked you, take a moment and think about something that you're avoiding, something you need to do, whether it's tackling a difficult conversation or going to the doctor for a checkup or doing something really boring like calling the credit card and saying like, hey, what is this charge? Or and taking on something that feels overwhelming, or paying your bills, or studying, or creating that thing for work or school, or cleaning the house. Like, again, like, like, I used to think I was really good at washing dishes, and in college I learned that I was really bad at it. That like my roommates would be like, they would hold up the dish and be like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'm not as good as I thought." I had like a whole thing and a technique that I thought was like the most amazing thing, and but it turns out I was terrible at doing dishes. But that doesn't mean I got to stop. I don't have to create the perfectly clean dish. I mean, like, it's safe. It's just not pretty to look at. But like, if you got a sink full of dishes, and this has been happening to me, I don't have a dishwasher here. In my Airbnb in Hawaii, I do, but here and in New York, we don't have such fancy things. So, what you do is you pick up the first thing, and in here in Tokyo, it's usually a chopstick. It's not hard to clean a chopstick. You take your chopstick, you take your sponge, you get it all soapy in there, and then you rinse it off and you put it in the little thing. And before you know it, you're grabbing another chopstick. And before you know it, and because, at the end of the day, I just want to go to bed. I'm tired. I don't want to get my hands wet. I don't want to get all soapy. I certainly don't want to look at an ugly drain, because after I do the dishes, there's probably going to be food in the little catcher thing, and then I got to empty that. But you know what? If I just grab one chopstick and start washing, pretty soon I wake up. And in the morning, that's the good part. You wake up in the morning and you see all these pristine dishes next to the sink, instead of a sink full of like old food and dirty dishes. It gives you the motivation to do it again, right? So, getting back to perfectionism, so many times people feel like they have to get the right equipment, or the right conditions during the day, or they have to feel a certain way to get something done. And you know what? I say just do it. Now, look, um, I got sick twice. I went to Hawaii. I got sick. I had to buy this thing. I spent all this money, made me very nervous. I've got to learn how to deal with all of these Airbnb people that said, "Hey, I booked with the other person for this much, and now so I had to get on the phone. I want to create this video." And I'm just like, "Oh my goodness, how do I create a video?" But I did it. It sucks, but I did it, and I can do better. I wanted a bunny therapy t-shirt, and I found a way to do it. I went to Uniqlo. This is a quality t-shirt, right? I created this with my camera, and then I downloaded Canva, and I learned how to use it. Now, if somebody just said to you, "Hey, I want you to make a t-shirt," you'd be like, "Oh my goodness, I don't know what to do." Well, first of all, you need to start out with a video. I used this toy and I put it in a Zen garden. I took a picture and I learned how to eliminate, some of the background and stuff like that. And then I learned how to use Canva, and I created it so that there's no square, right? That it's see through. And then it turns out, if you go to Kinko's, you can buy your own t-shirts and set them on there and put it on there. And 3 minutes later, you've got a high quality t-shirt. And if you go to my Patreon page for $5, now at the $20 level, you get like the t-shirt and the stickers, and at the $5 level, you just support me. Thank you very much. Namaste. And but I tell you what, if the first 10 people to sign up, and you can cancel, it's $5. I will send you one of these bunny therapy t-shirts. They come in green, they come in blue, they come in white, they come in women's, they come in pink. If you do that, I'll send you a t-shirt. It sounds like a real hassle because I don't speak good enough Japanese to deal with the post office very well, but I'll do it for you if you do it for me. Because if I get another 17 people on there, then I can open up a shop on the Patreon. And then that helps me do what I'm doing right now with you, which is trying to improve the lives of people all over the world. Because, like in this part of the world, it ain't like New York. There's a big stigma about mental health. As a matter of fact, there is there's the idea of expressing emotion is considered immature, and the idea of complaining is highly frowned upon. And if you compliment somebody, they're supposed to say no, right? And people have a public face and they have a private face, and even their best friends and family sometimes don't know the private thoughts. And I'm trying here because like the people are suffering unnecessarily. They're alone with this private world that they feel like they can't share with anybody. And that's my mission, is to help you, to help people, to get people to go to Therapist for Me, that's the number 4 for me.jp, or Harold let's see, Harold Square Psychology. There's a new website, NYC, hsp-nyc.com. And you can book an appointment, or you can look up things, or you can find it. And if we're not for you, I'll help you find the right place. But there's no reason to get in the way. And like I said, my job is to find out what it is that you want from life. So if you look at that comment section, and I said, take a moment to think about something you're avoiding, and I'm asking you, can you pick up these heavy fingers and type in that chat button and tell me an example of something that you are avoiding doing that would make your life better? I will help you with that. And if you go on the Patreon for $50, I will personally do that with you. There's no obligation. You don't have to sign up for therapy every week, but I'll help you with that. I'll break it down with you. And I mean, that's something that, like, you got to live your life, right? You got to live your life the best you can. Now, so what I'm trying to get you to do is to take a risk, a calculated risk, to put yourself out there, to go out there and do things. Now, I want to emphasize that safety is always first. I'm not saying go out and like at the federal government, when they talked about sexual harassment, they said you can ask somebody out, but if they say no, go with that. Right. I'm not saying sexually harass anybody. I'm not saying go out and pick a fight. I'm not saying confront. I'm not saying go up to your boss and say, like, look, man, I'm underappreciated. You either give me a raise or I quit. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying, and of course, if it's a physical activity, please check with your physician first. You know what? Go ahead. I've said it so many times, that one of the things that people avoid is like going into the doctor. Go into the doctor and say, like, hey, do I have any restrictions? Is there anything I need to know? And all of a sudden things become possible that weren't possible before. But safety first. There's your physical safety, and then there's your financial safety, and there's your interpersonal safety and your legal safety. Don't compromise anything safe that compromises safety, but you can take a calculated risk. You can take a well thought out adult decision and decide to say, you know what? I like Alex, and I want to know if Alex will go get coffee with me, right? You can do that, right? Um, One of the things that I keep trying to emphasize is that taking risks in life often means failure. And I was doing so well in New York. I decided to expand to Tokyo and California at the same time. Big mistake. It was a total failure. I was locked into this 5-year lease in Long Beach, California. And it was so humiliating because the model that worked like great in New York failed miserably and became a financial albatross, and I was losing money. And I really wanted out of this lease. And the lease didn't have what is called a good guy clause. A good guy clause means, hey, things aren't working out. Can I just break the lease now and go on my merry way because I'm losing money? And they're like, no, you can't do that. And the very idea of imagining myself being embarrassed, which I think is a really powerful feeling, and saying like, look, things aren't working out the way I thought. I thought I was King Midas, that everything I touched turned to gold. It turns out I'm not King Midas. What I'm turning into is bankruptcy. And I would really like out of this lease because it's just sitting there empty and I can't do anything. And it was humiliating and embarrassing. But I finally asked. I said, "Hey, can you do this for me?" They're like, "Yeah, it's not in there." And then I came back like a few months later, and I'm like, "I know it's not in there, but is there a way to appeal to somebody to amend the contract?" And they're like, "No." And then, but I was on their radar, right? And then they said, "Hey, by the way, we have a tenant. They're looking for an additional location, and they'll take over your lease. So do you want to get rid of this lease?" And I was like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Now, if I hadn't tolerated the humiliation and embarrassment of like basically begging to be let out of this lease and because I was bleeding money, they wouldn't have thought of me. But I took that risk and I tolerated the embarrassment. And then somebody came along and took the lease. And guess what happened 2 months later? Corona. Corona. I got out of the lease right before Corona. Can you imagine years of having to pay that and nobody's at the office anyway? But I was able to overcome the cotton candy mountain made out of humiliation and embarrassment, and I touched it, and eventually it went away. Poof. You can do the same. So even though nobody, and I can see that like dozens of people have watched this, nobody's taking the time to tell me what it is that they're avoiding. I hope it's carried around in their minds, because there's no reason for it other than the fact that it makes them uncomfortable, and if they make contact with it, it will disappear. Now, having said all that, you can go to HSP, Herald Square Psychology, HSP NYC, heraldsquarepsychology.com, or therapist, the number 4, me.jp. Go to the contact page, send an email. Only I get it. My dozens of employees do not get it. If you want services, you can do that. If you go to the Bunny Therapy channel and go down to the description, you can send messages to me there. I put my own phone number on there. You can text me. You can join the Patreon and send me messages there. I'm available. I'm available for you, even though I'm running 2 companies and now running an Airbnb and doing customer service and coming up with this YouTube channel and trying to think of ways to help people like you. I'm available, and you can live a better life. You can get a Bunny Therapy t-shirt. You can go to the Airbnb. And remember, this here Dr. Fur is a higher primate. And so are you. why don't we stop here?